Hello and welcome to the Musical Instrument Investigator. Today we are back on the French auction portal Inter Encheres, and we're looking at the final Vichy Encheres auction. This is the third one that is covering quartet instruments. So if you've seen my other videos, you've seen the first and second video. They've been gradually progressing to kind of higher levels of kind of items. So this is the final sale that's happening on December the 2nd. This is the kind of the higher tier stuff. Some of the stuff is kind of lower level, like 1,000, 2,000 euro kind of stuff, but this also goes up to the kind of top level. As before, the buyer's premium is 24%. This is an auction in France, so if you're outside of France, check all the specs about kind of fees, export, shipping, etc, etc. This one is 378 lots, so not too bad, friendlier than the last one, and somewhere in between the last one and the first one in terms of numbers. A bit easier to digest than some of the Vichy auctions are, so hopefully it should be all right, and this should hopefully be an interesting auction. So that's enough from me, and I will just kind of crack on now, and let's just have a look what we've got. So first up, we have a violin by Lebert Humbert. But of course, we have to start with something French, don't we? So it's obviously a better quality one there. Then we have a small viola by Francois Breton from 1815. It's an interesting setup there, is Baroque. Interesting. I have a violin by Jean-Baptiste Leonidas Nagini, made in Paris, 1930. 1,500 to 2,000 is the estimate there. Now an interesting viola made in the style of Paul Bailey, early 20th century. Starting to see a few more pictures as well. And a violin by Hippolyte Luc Collet, Mirecourt, nice varnish. Yeah, that's quite pleasant. 2,500 to 3,000 euros there. A viola by Louis Moitissier in Mirecourt, 1810-1820. Like the F-hole work there. So we're starting to see now the better quality items here. And a violin by Joseph Aubry, made in Le Havre. Interesting. 1935. A violin by Julien Laveste in Montlecan, or however you pronounce that. One day I will learn how to pronounce things, but not today. Violin by Eugene Langonnet in Nantes, 1956. Interesting 19th century Italian violin bearing the Eugenio Gigliazzi label, head replaced, 356 there. 4,000 to 5,000 euros. I like it. It's cool. It's got charm. And a probably French violin, beginning of the 20th century there. 1,500 to 2,000. A violin probably by Johannes Georgius Thier, made in Vienna, 1760, in Baroque setup there, 2,000 to 3,000. It's a nice looking thing. I like that. Anything in Baroque setups does it for me. German violin, Mittenwald, Klotz School, 18th century. A violin from the school of Jules Galliard, made in Mirecourt. A probably German violin, made about 1780, with an Ouvrar label. A violin by Tebiesco, made in Toulon, 1856. Lovely back actually on that. Shame about the crack on the F-hole there, but an interesting violin that. Another French provincial violin there from the 18th century. As some worms have been at it. A violin by Emile Fetique. A violin by Jean-Baptiste Frebrunet. Miracle. Violin by Maurice Mermillot. $7,000 to $8,000 is the estimate there. Interesting violin made in Miracle, 19th century. Nice back on that, beautiful. Very nice indeed. And then an interesting violin by Nicolas Denizot, made in Tours, 1847. Albert Blanchy violin, made in Nice, 1924. A violin by Marc Lebert, made in Mirecourt, 1930. And a French violin of the school of Medard, made around 1680 there. 8 to 10,000 is the estimate there. It's a nice instrument there. And we're on to a few bows. A Bazin bow there. A Louis Thomasin bow. A Jean Joseph Martin violin bow. A Morizot violin bow. A Charles Francois Picat violin bow. That was a big 10 to 12,000 one. A Bazin viola bow. Violin bow, J.H. Henry. A violin bow by Eugene Nicholas Sartori. Another Bazin bow here. Cello bow by Auguste Barbe, 6 to 8,000. And a violin bow by Bazin. An Houchard violin bow there. And a violin bow from the workshop of Dominique Picat, 3 to 4,000 there is the estimate. A bow by Eugene Cugnot. Violin bow by Emile Auguste Houchard, 8 to 10,000. That's another big one there. Violin bow by Charles Nicolas Bazin. And violin bow by Emile Francois Houchard. Cello bow by Joseph Thomasin. And a violin bow by Charles Nicolas Bazin. And a violin bow by Emile Auguste Houchard, 6 to 7,000 there. Violin bow by Francois Lotte. A violin bow by Louis Joseph Morizot. And a violin bow by Marie-Louise Pionneau. Now we can move on to the second page now. Excellent. And a violin bow by Bazin. And a violin bow by Eugene Nicholas Sartori, 15 to 18,000. and a violin by Georges Felix Remy, and a violin by Marc Lebert, and a violin by Maurice Rougier, and a violin by Egidius Klotz, made in Mitterwald around 1765 in Baroque setup there. An interesting 18th century German violin, the J.P. Schorn or Schön label. A violin by Alphonse de Sumer, Antwerp, 1958. And a viola by Lucien Schmidt, made in Grenoble, 1970. And a French provincial violin made around 1750-1760 with a Galeazzi label, head replaced. A violin from Ghent, an Amp Bernardel, made in Paris, 1882. 10 to 12,000 euros is the estimate on that. And a French violin from the school of Grandjean. A violin by François Corsat, made in Neufchâteau around 1860. Charles Annals violin. A violin by Etienne Laprovotte. A violin by Aristide Cavalli, made in Cremona, 1920. 4 to 5,000 is the estimate on that. 360 is the length of the back. And a violin with a Fulurat label. Violin by François Vial, made in Monaco, 1915. Nice back on that. And a viola by Paul Cowell, made in Nantes, 1925. A violin by Léon Mougenot Gauche, made in Mirecourt, 1928. And a violin by Gond in 1865, 12 to 15,000 is the estimate there. French violin in the style of Grand Gérard, replaced head, also quite nice. A 20th century viola made as an Italian copy, also quite curious. Violin by Charles Jean-Baptiste Colin Mazin, it's a higher level of the Colin Mazins. The violin by Amédée Dudouin. here is a big lot. Violin by Stefano Scarampella, made in Mantua, 1909. Few worm bites on the table, but otherwise good condition. 358mm. So this is a very high level instrument. Nice looking thing. 60 to 80,000 euros. It'd be interesting to see what that ends up going for. It's a violin bow in the style of Duchamp the second. A Bazin bow there. And a violin bow by Claude Thomasin. Interesting, a violin bow by William Johnston at William E. Hills. Unusual to see English bow in these French auctions. Nicholas Malin, cello bow, 12 to 15,000. Yeah, that's a big one. Violin bow from the workshop of Francois Picat, needing a fair bit of work there, but still holds some value there. A Charles Claude Husson violin bow. And a violin bow by Émile François Huchard. A violin bow by Bazin. A violin bow by Claude Auguste Thomasin. Charles Louis Bazin, violin bow there. And a viola bow by Henri Louis Gillette. And a violin bow by Émile Huchard. And a violin bow from the School of Simon. And a Nicholas Leonard Tort violin bow, made around 1790. That's 18 to 20,000. There is the estimate. So that's a heavy hitter. And a cello bow by Morizon. Interesting. And another violin bow by Morizon. Let's just see what's here. And a violin bow by Victor Francois Fatigue. And a viola bow by Marc Lebert. And a violin bow by Claude Auguste Thomasin. And a violin bow by Celestin Emile Clasquin. And a violin bow by Nicolas Simon. Needs a bit of repair. And then we are on to the next page again, which is good. And a violin bow by Émile Huchard. And a cello bow from Nicholas Mayer's workshop. And oh wow, a Dominic Picat violin bow, 1845, mounted in silver, 70 to 80,000 euros. So this really is the pinnacle there of, well, not the pinnacle, but one of the kind of top end bows you can have there. So 19th century Mircore cello. It's got a soundpost crack on the back, traces of worm. They were hungry, which is for cello, which is fair enough. They've got to eat as well. A German cello, 20th century, the Steiner label. And a Mircore cello early 20th century. A German cello from around 1900, good condition. A cello by Jean-Baptiste Colin Vezin, Charles Jean-Baptiste, double purfling. 10 to 12,000 is the estimate there. A cello probably by Francois Collin even, needs a bit of attention. Mirecourt cello there with a Jules Lamy label. A German cello, late 19th century, with the iron mark of Vidudez. German cello, early 20th century. It's had a restored soundpost crack on the back. Cello by Paul Mongenot. 10 to 12,000 is the estimate on that. A cello from the house of Gabriel Jamis and Meyer, made in Mirecourt. A Mirecourt cello made in 1870, circa 1870. Cello by Augustin Clodo. '20th century Mirecourt cello there, with a Violin label of some kind. And a cello by Juste Derazy, made in Mirecourt, 1881. This is a 12 to 15,000 euro estimate on this. French cello, second part of the 19th century there. Has a label for Charles Galliard. Cello by Lebert Humbert. A 20th century cello with a Belafontana label. German Mirecourt, cello, Mirecourt, going mad again with the Magini things. Interesting, a cello by Pieter Rumboltz, made in Amsterdam around 1720, with a label for Matthias Albanus. It's interesting, 30 to 40,000, yeah. Interesting colour to the varnish there. That's an interesting lot. Mirecourt cello, late 19th century, the Charot Milot label. Cello by JTL. And a Mirecourt cello there, with a Breton mark. Another French cello there. And a French provincial cello there, Paul Claudol's iron mark. And here we go, wow. A cello by Giovanni Grancino, made in Milan, 1690 to 1695, with the Giovanni Grancino label, different restorations. Some pieces on the head, some worm. So this is one of those ones which has lots of conditions to buy, but obviously this is a top lot. 250 to 300,000 euros. This really is something in the top tier there. Very interesting. Whole load of frogs here by Bazar, Cuno, Gouriard, all ivory mounted, so absolutely useless, other than for collectors, in my opinion. Joseph Gauld's Violin Bow. Louis Thomasin Violin Bow. Violin Bow by JTL. A violin bow by a cello bow by Etienne Pajot, around 1820. So this is a big one. 30 to 35,000. There is the estimate there. It's got ivory in it, so that can make things a bit more complicated. German violin bow, made around 1900. A Louis Joseph Morizot violin bow. A Jean-Joseph Martin cello bow. A Louis Joseph Morizot cello bow. An Edgar Bishop violin bow made around 1925, signed Hills and Sons, tortoiseshell and gold, the fleur-de-lis. Interesting. 8 to 10,000. Yeah, this is the top tier of hill bows. These tortoiseshell fleur-de-lis ones, but not very friendly for travelling. Bazat violin bow. A Celestin Emile Clasquin violin bow. Auguste Barbe violin bow, made around 1895. And a Joseph Arthur Vigneron cello bow. And here is a violin bow by Georges Leon Lamy, 15 to 18,000 there. Looks like a nice stick. Cello bow from the Bazat Fetique school. A Joseph Gauld viola bow. A Jean-Joseph Martin violin bow. Interesting cello bow from the Picat school. And a cello bow by Emile Auguste Bouchard. And onwards we go. A violin bow by Joseph Gauld, made around 1845. Violin bow by Victor Francois Fetique. A violin bow by André Vigneron. A violin bow by Henri Louis Guillet. A violin bow by Nicolas Remy Maire. And more instruments here. A violin by Nicolas Coutreau, made in Toulouse, and a Magini kind of purfling there. Violin from the Derazy school. Rare violin by Somni, made in Paris around 1870. Violin from the school of Jules Ngeliard. A violin by Pierre Louvet. Paris in 1743 there. Violin by Charles Jean-Baptiste Colomazat. Violin by François Hippolyte Consin, made in Neufchâteau. A violin by Albert Blanchy, 8 to 10,000 on that. Violin of the House of Cusno. And a violin by Joseph Hill, made in Lille, 1899, 12 to 15,000 there. Violin made in Mirecourt, probably by Victor Jean-Baptiste Jondel. Violin by François Cossin at Neufchâteau. A violin of the German school, end of the 18th century. A violin by Léon Mougenot. Interesting violin by Honoré Derazy, 8 to 10,000 there. French provincial violin, second half of the 18th century. Violin by Justin and Paul Dieter, made in Marseille. Honoré Derazy violin, Mirecourt 1840. French violin with the label of J.P. Michelot. And a violin by Joseph Hell, made in Lille 1891, 14 to 16,000 this one. Violin by Gustave Adel. Needs some work there. Late 19th century violin, modelled on Del Gesù, with a Guarneris label there. It's interesting. Let's just quickly see what else is around. Okay, then on to this. Let's see, we're into bits and pieces here. Violin by Nicolas Viaume in Mirecourt, around 1850, a Stentor 3 model, label and iron mark of a Stentor. Okay, in pieces. Here is a violin by Vincenzo Sannino, made in Naples, 1911. 35 to 40,000 is the estimate. That's an interesting looking violin there. And we're on to some more bows. A violin bow by Paul Emile Michel. And a violin bow by Marc Lebert. A cello bow by Louis Piano. and a violin bow by Joseph Vorin, a violin bow by Nicolas Malin, and a cello bow by Morison, a violin bow by Claude Auguste Thomasin, a violin bow by Jean-Joseph Martin, English school violin bow made around 1790 there. Interesting. Comes from the old collection of Arnold Dolmetsch. That's curious. Yep, 2,000 to 3,000 is the estimate. A cello bow by Victor Francois Fetique. A violin bow by Marc Lebert. A 7/8 violin bow by Victor Fetique. And here is a violin bow by Simon. A cello bow by Eugene Nicholas Sartori. Just had a repair there, so it might be a usable bow, but value has been hit hard. As a viola bow by Henri Louis Guillet, 25 to 30,000 euros there is the estimate. And a violin bow by Bazin. And a violin bow by Claude Thomasin. And a violin bow by Victor Francois Fetique. And we are on to another page. A violin bow by Emile Francois Huchard. And a cello bow by Francois Nicolas Vorin. And a violin bow by Marcel Lapierre. And a violin bow by Emile Francois Huchard. And a violin bow made in a copy of Sartori around 1950. Nicolas Malin violin bow. A viola bow by Etienne Pajot, 35 to 40,000 euros there. 19th century violin, branded on the heel, C. Clark, Glasgow. Violin by Julien Laveste in Montcalon. And a violin by Nicolas Villot made in Mirecourt with the Stentor brand. A violin by Charles Jean-Baptiste Colomazin. Violin by Honoré Derazy, 8 to 10,000 there, needs a bit of work. '18th century violin, probably from the German school, with the Goffrilla label. Quite like this. This is interesting to me anyway. Violin from the second part of the 18th century with the Benoit Fleuret label. A violin by Paul Bailey, made in Paris 1902, Magini, purfling. Violin by Augustin Chapuis, 1770. 4,500 to 5,000 euros is the estimate there. Here's another big one. Here's a interesting small violin by Antonio and Girolamo Amati, made in Cremona around 1610 to 1615. Head probably replaced by Francesco Ruggiero. Raised ribs, various restorations, etc. I've actually seen some pictures of this that are not on the actual listing, which show the ribs and where they've been extended on the top of the bottom, and it's definitely quite curious. 40 to 50,000 is the estimate. Obviously, interesting opportunity to own Amati at, well, depends how much it goes for, but potentially at a lower rate. Violin by Emil Horth in Copenhagen. Quite nice back on that, actually. And a violin, Charles Jean Baptiste Colin-Mazin. And another Colin-Mazin. Violin by Georges Apperut. And another interesting violin, probably by Peter Rombalts, Amsterdam, early 18th century there. Definitely interesting there. 15 to 20,000 is the estimate. Violin from Eastern countries, earliest 20th century. Ernst Liebig label. A 3/4 violin by Giuseppe Fiorini, made in Bologna in 1880, 5 to 6,000. That's quite a rare opportunity for a 3/4 Italian violin. Nice scroll. Violin by Emile Laurent, made in Paris. Violin by Ghent and Bernardel, made in Paris. 12 to 15,000 is the estimate there. And viola by Giovanni Tedesco, made in Naples, 1931. 30 to 35,000 pounds there. So fairly serious instrument. French violin, made in Paris around 1760 with a Tekla label. Nice back. Violin by Charles Jacot, made in Paris around 1860, a Marti model. Cello probably by Carl Friedrich Heyer, made in Klingenthal around 1780. And a violin by Enrico Clodovio Melegari, made in Turin 1887. 25 to 30,000 is the estimate on that. And we have a Violin Bow by Emile Francois Houchard. A double bass bow by André Chanot. A violin bow by Louis Joseph Morizot. A violin bow by Francois Lupeau II, 20 to 25,000 there. That's a serious bow as well, a serious maker. A cello bow by Arnaud Suard. And a violin bow by Pierre Cugnot. And a violin bow by Joseph René Lefleur. Ooh. Something's gone on here. Violin bow by Marcel Lapierre. And a cello bow by Joseph Alfred Lamy. A violin bow by Bazin. A Violin Bow by Bizarre, and a Violin Bow by Jean-Joseph Martin. Where have we gone again? I've completely lost the plot here. And a Violin Bow by Louis Joseph Morizot, and a Violin Bow by André Georges Richomme, 15 to 20,000 euros there, the tortoiseshell frog, and a cello bow from the Pajot school, and a Violin Bow by Charles Nicolas Bazin, and a double bass bow by Victor Francois Fetique, and a Violin Bow by Claude Joseph Fonclause, a Violin Bow by Francois Nicolas Varin, a Bazin Violin Bow, a Violin Bow by Francois Lupeau, a Violin Bow by Charles Claude Husson, and here we have a Violin Bow by Francois Nicolas Varin in gold with tortoiseshell, the top level there, and a violin by Joseph Metelka, made in Passek, 1928. And a French violin with a Bernadelle label. It's a Magini type thing. And a violin from the workshop of Emile Bonnel. A violin from Germany, about 1780, with a Casa label. A violin by Jacques Bouquet, made in Paris around 1720, 1725, with a label as such, but with a newer head. German violin, second half of the 18th century, with an Albanus label. A violin of the German school, second part of the 18th century there. French double bass. And a French violin, end of the 18th century, with a Chapuis label. And an 18th century Italian violin from the school of Genoa, head replaced, 15 to 20,000 there is the estimate. 354 length of back. '18th century German violin with a Tekla label. And a Italian violin at the beginning of the 20th century, probably Italian, bearing a Panizetti label, 357. A violin by Christophe Veron, made in Chambéry. I like the scroll work there. 18th century violin, head end of the 18th century. English school, apparently. A viola by Paul Blanchard, Lyon. 12 to 15,000 is the estimate there. Violin Charles Jean-Baptiste Colin Mazin. And a French violin, Paris, 1716, from the School of Solomon. Interesting. A violin by Jules Galliard, made in Mirecourt around 1860. Late 18th century violin, inspired by the Italian school, with a Presenda label. And a violin by Stefan von Beer, made in Paris 2017, called Le Faust, with a Strad label. 50 to 55,000 is the estimate there. Interesting modern instrument. French violin, made circa 1670-1680, with a label Cavana. Large violin from the Viome school, made around 1875, with the Viome label. 365 back, Magini. That is pretty big. A viola by Claude Nicolas Collin, Mirecourt. A violin by Marc Lebert, Mirecourt. A violin by Enrico Marchetti, made around 1825 to 30, 20 to 25,000 pounds there. Certificate from Eric Blott of 2019. Nice varnish, quite nice wood on the back there. And a violin bow by Bazar. And a cello bow by JTL. A violin bow by Louis Simon Pajot. And a violin bow by Joseph Arthur Vigneron. And a cello bow by Etienne Pajot, 20 to 22,000. Is the estimate on that one. And a cello bow by Émile Houchard. A violin bow by Louis Joseph Morizot. A violin bow by Georgios Thepos, made around 2000. And a cello bow by Jean-Jacques Millant, 1970. A cello bow by Joseph Arthur Vigneron. A violin bow by Claude Auguste Thomasin. And a violin bow by Charles Nicolas Bazar. A cello bow by Louis Joseph Morizot. And a violin bow by Thomas Tubbs, made circa 1840. Looks like it needs some attention there. And a viola bow by Eugene Nicolas Sartori, 25 to 30,000 euros there. And a cello bow by Eric Grandchamp. It's actually quite like that. That's quite nice. And a taut Pajot school viola bow, made around 1830 there. 2 to 3,000. Yep, definitely needs a bit of work on that one, but interesting nevertheless. And we're slowly marching on this auction, getting as far as we can. Okay, so we have a Violin Bow by Francois Pacat, 15 to 18,000 there. Cello Bow, sorry, by Etienne Pajot, 5 to 6,000. Violin Bow by Jean-Pierre Marie Pessuit, 15 to 20,000 is the estimate there. Violin Bow by Victor Francois Fetique. A Violin Bow by Charles Claude Husson. A double bass bow by André Chardon. A double bass bow by Charles Alfred Bazin. And a violin bow by Eugene Nicholas Sartori, 20 to 22,000 pounds is the estimate there. On to some more instruments here. A viola with a Dudorn label. A violin by Victor Ordonneau Morin. And a violin by Sébastien Auguste Deroux. A Mircore violin, 1860-1870. And a 20th century Italian cello made in the style of Novelli, with the label and iron mark of Pedrozzini, 12 to 15,000 there. French violin from the Bailey School, made around 1900. Mircore violin, 1870, 1880-ish. A violin by Claude Augustin Mirmont in Paris. A violin by Jean Larcher. Violin by Georges Chanot in Paris, 1830-1835. Does look quite nice. Interesting 18th century German violin, probably by Anton Schendel, Mittenwald. A violin by Victor Clermont, made in Mircore, 1770-ish. A violin by Jacques-Pierre Thibault. Interesting F-holes. Early 20th century cello. A violin by Plinio Michetti in Turin, 8 to 10,000. Violin of the Klotz family, made in Mittenwald around 1730-1740, with an Armati label. Violin by François Cossin, Neufchâteau. A violin by François Cotreau. A violin by Gustave Villaume, Nancy, or Villaume. Interesting violin of the School of Rome, made in the style of Michael Platner, circa 1740-1745, with a Michael Platner label. Some restorations to the table, 30 to 50,000 30 to 35,000 euros. The estimate there. Curious kind of thing. And a violin by Marc Lebert. French violin, 18th century, with a Peter Wembley label. Do they mean Peter Wormsley? I don't know. But who knows what's going on with that one there. Interesting and rare violin by Jacques-Pierre Michelot, Paris, around 1800. A violin by Charles Jean-Baptiste Colin Mazin. And a violin by Joseph Hill, Lille, 1899. So there's a few of these in the auction, 14 to 16,000 there. On to a few more bows here. Violin bow by Émile François Huchard. Violin bow by Cugner-Houry Huchard. Violin bow by Nicolas Meer, and there's cello bow by Nicolas Meer. And a violin bow by Henri Louis Guillet. And a violin bow by Joseph Henri, 1860-1865, 35 to 40,000. That's a serious, another serious bow there. Cello bow by Victor Thomasin. And a violin bow by Heinrich Karl Knopf. Violin bow by Émile Auguste Huchard. And a cello bow by Francois Nicolas Varin, 10 to 15,000 is the estimate there. And a viola bow by Jean-Joseph Martin. And a cello bow by Joseph Arthur Vigneron there. And a violin bow by Émile François Huchard. A cello bow by Jean-Joseph Martin. A violin bow by Charles Nicolas Bazin. And a viola bow by Jules Fetique, 18 to 20,000 is the estimate there. And I think we're on the final page, aren't we? Yep, we're on the final page, so let's crack on and get it done. Violin bow by Louis Joseph Morizot. Violin bow stick by Joseph Arthur Vigneron. A violin bow by Victor Fetique. And a cello bow by Louis Thomasin. And a violin bow by Nicolas Remy Mayer. Ooh, I think I've skipped one there. A cello bow by Charles Louis Bazin. And another Bazin violin bow. And a cello bow by Jean-Dominique Adam. And a viola bow by Roger Francois Lot. Violin bow by Etienne Pajot, about 1835, 35 to 40,000 euros. Another serious bow. A German violin, 1780, 1800. Interesting choice of wood for the top there. Definitely curious. And a violin by Lucien Schmidt in Grenoble. and a violin by Francois Cossat and Neufchâteau. And a viola made by the Lebert Regny workshop, probably like Manier or something like that. It's probably the correct spelling. A viola by Sesto Rocci, made in Sao Paulo in 1968. 28 to 30,000 euros is the estimate there. A violin by Leon Bernadel. A small size viola, Mirecourt 1820-1830 with E-Gand iron mark. A violin by Amédée Dudouin. French violin in Paris, 1770. Okay, a Martin Diels cello, made in Maine, 1782. A French violin made around 1765. The Chapuis mark, in fact. A French provincial violin around 1775 with an iron mark IN on the heel. A French violin, second part of the 18th century, with the Fleury iron mark. Violin by Joseph Nicolas Leclerc, 1778. 17,000 to 20,000 is the estimate on that one. The French violin, 1770, from the Frebronnet school. Seven-eighth Violin Bow by Victor Fetique. Cello Bow by Francois Nicolas Vorin. A Viola Bow by Jean-Jacques Melant. A Violin Bow by Nicolas Mayer. A Violin Bow by Louis-Joseph Morizot. A Violin Bow by Francois Nicolas Vorin. A Violin Bow by Francois Jude Goulard. A Cello Bow by Pierre Simon. And a Violin Bow from the Peugeot workshop. And a Cello Bow by Eugene Nicolas Sartori, 15 to 20,000 there. And a Violin Bow by Francois Nicolas Vorin. And a Violin Bow by Émile Auguste Auchat-Fille. And a Viola Bow by Nicolas Remy Mayer, 10 to 15,000 euros. A Violin Bow by Émile Auguste Auchat-Fille. And a Violin Bow from the Simon School. And a Cello Bow by Nicolas Mayer, around 1845. 40 to 45,000 pounds. That's another high hitter. Then we have the final lot here is a Cello Bow by Eugene Sartori, about 1910, 20 to 25,000. So that's it. Pretty good going. So we've done it. We completed the auction. We completed all of the Vichy auctions now. So thank God for that in a way. This auction actually amazing. So many interesting things, but just once again a bit too many. But yeah, really good auction. Some amazingly interesting stuff like the Armati and just some of the really fine French bows, French violins, older French violins, some of the other wild card kind of things, and really interesting. So if you're curious about this auction, this is on the 2nd of December, this particular one, where all the finest stuff is in. I'll put a link in the description. Check it out, see what you think. Remember, this auction's in France, so check all your shipping things and stuff. And thanks for watching, and until next time, ciao for now. Bye. Many thanks for tuning in to the Musical Instrument Investigator. I hope that you enjoyed the video. If you did, then please like, subscribe and turn on notifications, and watch out for the next video coming soon.